people think that they have to be extroverted. They believe that in order to be relatable, you're obviously part of it is putting yourself out there and connecting to people. And they feel like, well, what do I do if I'm an introvert? Or what do I do if I'm shy? And so that's a question I get over and over again. And the fact is, you can be just as relatable, regardless of whether you are on this side of introversion or this side of extroversion. It's all something that you can do and be no matter where you fall.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Keynote Curators Podcast. I'm Seth Deckman, your Keynote Curator. And today we're going to be diving into communication and really how to connect with others and the power of being unapologetically relatable. Rachael D'Alto is our guest. Rachael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Also, my dogs immediately start barking only when I'm talking. So
well,
you hear
they're
them in the
trying to
background.
find a way. They're trying to find a way into the communication, which is one of the things you're going to be sharing with us. How to do that, how to get into a conversation, and how to intrude in a loving, appealing, and attractive kind of way. But if you're a dog lover, which I know you are, any intrusion by your dog would be okay.
It's always welcome, but I'm always trying to explain them away because, again, I'm not sure if you have dogs, but if you're recording from home, no matter what you're doing, they are silent, silent, silent. And then immediately they're like, Mom's doing something. Let's get in there.
They know what's going on. They know what's
They
going
do.
on.
They do.
So what's your dog's name? We
have two. We have Mac and Moose.
All right,
so
Mac
they're
and Moose.
Monsters.
Chill for a little bit. You'll get some extra love after we're done having this conversation. Rachael, I want to dive right into it. Our audience is coming back more and more and listening for great content, great conversations from keynote speakers, meeting professionals, and all kinds of guests that we have. I want your take on what is the biggest myth that people believe they need to become more relatable?
Ooh, the biggest myth I would say is that people think that they have to be extroverted. They believe that in order to be relatable, you're obviously part of it is putting yourself out there and connecting to people. And they feel like, what do I do if I'm an introvert? Or what do I do if I'm shy? And so that's a question I get over and over again. And the fact is, you can be just as relatable, regardless of whether you are on this side of introversion or this side of extroversion. It's all something that you can do and be no matter where you fall.
One of the common things that comes up on our podcast, and we've had meeting professionals, which I know you deal with frequently through your keynotes, and whether it's, during the pre-event calls or on site or the post-event or everything in between, event planners, event marketers who are so outward facing and so in the spotlight, if you will, often I find are, in their own words, introverts. So while they're in situations where they're exposed, they're very, very visible, they have this sense of this introversion, but are able to turn it on. How do you square that? How do you reconcile that? Where a myth is you don't have to be an extrovert, but to be relatable, it requires some level of connection, some level of reaching out, extending yourself, or being open. So how do you reconcile that?
One of my favorite hacks for my introverted friends who are looking to make more connections or be just more comfortable with being out there and having conversations and being more relatable is actually being more curious. So it's something that has been studied, and they find that in the research that the people who speak the most in a conversation rank it the highest. So I always say for my introverted friends, if you are in a situation where you do feel kind of out there and you have to have these conversations, ask questions, get people talking, get the other person talking. Yes, it does require you to talk a little bit, but you're redirecting it. And so ask questions of the other person and then ask some follow-up questions. We don't want to interrogate, but at the same time, you can start to have that conversation, put the emphasis on them. All of a sudden, they're talking, they think, oh my gosh, this person is giving me so much attention and they're being so present that all of a sudden they think, wow, that's an amazing human being because they're getting that presence from them without them having to actually put themselves too far out there.
That's a great tip. Being interested, I've heard the phrase, it's way more important to be interested than interesting.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's a great life hack, particularly for the introverts. I'm not saying all meeting professionals are. I know a lot that index way on the other end of it. But this is why our viewers and subscribers come back here. So I just want to give a shout out. Hello. As you know, we're growing the channel. So subscribe, like, love, share, and share alike. And just thanks for continuing to trust us and believe in us as a place that's important to get great information for your personal and professional life. So, Rachel, let's continue on this path of being connected and being relatable. How did you arrive at this being your jam?
It was completely unintentional. I mean, my entire life has been completely unintentional. I feel like there's just doors that open. I was like, oh, that seems like a good door, whether it was going from being a startup founder to the media to now as a speaker. And so this was kind of one of those doors. Relatability as a concept actually came about. I was on a show called Married at First Sight as one of the experts. So I was on seasons 4 and 5, and went on to host a bunch of other shows. But when I decided TV kind of was great, I love TV and I had so much fun with it. But I realized I was really navigating far into more in the speaking world. I left the show and I got all of these messages from everyone on social media especially when I left Married at First Sight, because it still has this huge audience. I think it's like season 16 or 7. It could be more than that at this
Wow.
point. It's wild. And so I got all these messages, and it's always interesting to me because I always believe that one person's comment is an opinion. But if you have three people's comments, it's a fact. And I got thousands of messages using the same word. They kept saying, "Why did you leave? You were such a relatable expert." And
Mm,
so that's what really led me to try to understand, well, what does that mean? I'm just a talking head. I'm on your television or, your computer screen or your phone. And so that's where I started to study relatability, because I was like, there's something here. Like if I keep getting this word, and so I didn't want to just make it about me because I'm always very cautious around people who are like, do this, exactly as I did it, because that's what worked for me. And I believe that sample sizes of one probably aren't the most accurate. And so that's
right.
when I went on to really study what is relatability, how do people become more relatable, and why does it matter? And so that's what led me here. It's very bizarre.
But so but were you surprised that, I mean, like you say, one is an opinion and then there's agreement, right? There's an agreement out
Sure.
there in the ether, out in the, you know, social media sphere or whatever. But were you surprised, or was that something that was hidden from you?
Well, yes and no, because it's such a weird thing. This isn't it's a reality show, but it's very much a filmed reality show. And there's certain beats you have to hit, and there's certain commentary. So I still feel like there's not a lot of my personality that came out. Like I hope I'm a pretty relatable person. I think
Right.
I'm pretty real. I'm myself in every situation, whether I'm on stage or off stage or on camera or off camera. But I'm like, it's a Lifetime television show. They edit the heck out of that, and
Right.
you're still
Right.
getting it. That's the part that surprised me. I was like, "Whoa, really?" Like, I
Yeah.
feel that's cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the part that surprised
No,
me.
that's an interesting answer. And maybe there was something behind my curiosity, right? Like, but it seems to me you were mostly being you, albeit they're editing, or you can't help but know that you're being filmed. So there might be like that human infinitesimal aspect where you're like self-conscious, oh my God, I'm being filmed, which could impact you being truly authentic. But I ask because people who are generally relatable generally are tilt more towards an extrovert than an introvert, generally are curious, as something that they don't have to consciously think about, like, let me show more interest. um to me, if I'm going to make this all about me, if I were to get those messages, those direct messages saying, hey, you're so relatable, it would raise a flag like, wow, a lot of people don't feel relatable or have struggle with being relatable. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to
Sure.
take merit away from their acknowledgement, admiration, and recognition of your facility and your natural relatability, right? But I think
Sure.
if you look at the source, and it's taken time for me to understand this, whether it's extroverts versus introverts, that not everybody is like me or has ease with doing talking to people. And so if you could take that and go a little bit further down the road, land the plane for me. There's a question in here somewhere, but like, how do you shape your approach to providing people access, a pathway, training, developing at the dose and measure that matches their personality to go ahead and be relatable? Is there's
Sure.
something there to answer, right? I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're right. And I do think a lot of people, they recognize things that they may not or do see in themselves, but oftentimes don't see in themselves. So they're trying to achieve that. And so when I started to think about teaching relatability or creating this blueprint to it, whether we're talking about connection between people on a professional level, personal level, or even on a leadership level, it's really figuring out where's that scale fit that person. And so I have a framework, and the framework allows people figure out what you're comfortable with. And I always think about oh my gosh, what was that? I'm gonna date myself. That Billy Crystal movie where we talked about baby steps. It was The Shrink. He was the
Yeah.
therapist, but they talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
baby steps. And it's this old movie. But I've always kept baby steps in my head. It's like take those baby steps. And so no matter where you are on that scale, you can find pieces of it that feel a little bit more comfortable to you. And whether it's pieces of being a little bit more authentic or pieces of, focusing on curiosity or communication and really being intentional about that, you can kind of choose your own adventure. It doesn't feel like you have to go 0 to 60, which I
Right.
think is the challenge for so many people
Right.
who, social anxiety is huge. People overthink everything. And so I don't want to make it harder and be like, this is what you have to do. And they're like, I can't do that. So my goal is baby steps.
Walk us through maybe at a high level or to the
Sure.
level that works for you, the structure or that framework.
Yeah. So it's connect, communicate, inspire. And I make this joke, especially in my keynotes. I actually have an AI singing version of, I call it Kakai, because I joke around every.
Gesundheit.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's definitely a sneeze. But I make fun of myself because all of these leaders, they have this thought leadership that they've packaged into these really cool acronyms, and I have
Right.
none of that. But it's Kakai, and so it's connection. It's figuring out how can I be more authentic? How can I show up? How can I build trust? How can I connect in that foundational level? And then the communication is really kind of what we just talked about is how can I be more present? How can I show up in a way that people feel like they're important and that they feel seen and heard? And then the I is inspire. And at that point, I'm like, I swear I'm not turning you into a motivational speaker. Inspire is really what inspires people to feel drawn to you. And for me, it's figuring out, it's a couple of things, but the one that I think is so digestible is our intentions around our words and our actions, how we show up because I do believe, especially in this day and age, we are the scrolling generations and we are so distracted. We're not being intentional in our words and actions. We're scrolling TikTok while replying to a text message,
Right.
and people are going to feel that. And so it's really figuring out how do I become more intentional. So that's the high
That
level.
right. That's high level. And I love the simplicity of it, but behind all simplicity is often there's a lot of thought, a lot of strategy, and it's not as easy as the simplicity of it might appear. Let's go a little bit deeper on that intention part. How
Sure.
does one identify or access what the intention there is? And this is a little bit getting into the psychology of it, but it
Yeah.
seems like it's important for one to connect. One must, at a certain level, begin to know oneself and what the intentions are, what appeals to you. And it could be something that you're somebody who's inspires trust or inspires intimacy,
Mhm.
confidence. And that might not be the sexiest, most thing that is on fire calling your attention. You're not climbing Everest, but that might be the intention that's there. Does that communicate? Could you dial us in a little bit to that?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head that the intention does come from that self-awareness and we can't work outwardly and we can't connect outwardly if we don't have some understanding of who we are and how we're showing up. And for intention, it really is it's figuring out, what is that driving force? I kind of look at it as two folds and I speak about it in two folds depending on the audience. In some cases, it really is what defines me, what drives me, what's the I call it my then what. because you could have the success and then what? You could get all the followers, but then what? You could get the job, but then what? What is that driving force? Why are you here?
Right.
And what does that mean? And so that's something, and that's kind of a bigger question. Sometimes, it depends on the situation where I want to make sure that it's appropriate for the conversation. I believe in figuring out kind of what lights us up and making sure that guides
Yeah.
us. And then the other side of intention is really how do I get very specific about what I'm doing? How do I put some intention and thought before I send the message, before I have the conversation, before I go to the conference? If you're a planner that's a little bit more introverted, how do I set an intention of I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to feel good about it? Because what we actually do and think and feel separates us from just kind of being in that not thinking and that autopilot setting.
There is psychology to it, which, I don't know if this is a sore spot for you, but having a background in law, I don't know if you're a recovering lawyer or not, but how do you use that background from law and psychology and then the framework that you've created, to influence others?
Yeah, I am fully recovered.
Okay.
So I am
Okay.
no longer.
Good.
Although the irony is now so
Your
often I
Your
speak
Honor,
to
state for the record that I want it
yeah,
put in that we're fully recovered. Okay, proceed.
fully recovered, fully recovered. Though I speak to the judiciary in New Jersey often. I think I've spoken to them about 7 times and again in the fall. And it's always funny to me. I was like, I'm home, but I left you all. I'm sorry.
I'm home,
uh,
but I'm
yeah,
not.
I'm leaving again. But I enjoy the background. I don't enjoy all the educational funds that have been that have been spent,
Right.
but I mixed it all together and even as a lawyer, my favorite thing to do was mediate. That was always really what I focused on because to me that's really trying to understand the people and the issues at play and really figure out where people had some wiggle room of whatever they were concerned with or focused on, and it's communication. And so I do feel like a lot of that is very similar to what I do now. And then I got a psychology degree. I went back and got a master's because I wanted to do research and I wanted to understand research. And so I'm one of those people. If I've tried a couple times to hire people to really help me with this and it didn't work or it wasn't flowing, I'm like, figure it out yourself. So I went
Right.
back and got the master's and I loved that. It was really awful going back to school after being out for 10 years. But once you kind of get in it, and now both of my books are just everything I do is supported by research because I believe that we have to have the backup. there's gotta
Yeah.
be there's
Yeah.
gotta be a foundation. And there's a lot of people out there with great ideas. And I'm like, well, that's your opinion. That's not supported. And so I
Well,
get a little snobby with research.
yeah, well, you know what? I think in today's world, I don't know if it's unfortunate, but with the swiping generation or the stopping the scroll generation, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but if you do have facts, which today are debatable, but if you do have facts, it does help bring weight, more weight to stopping the scroll or stopping the swipe or, grabbing
Hopefully.
somebody's attention. Hopefully, your book, we're going to keep putting the show notes, Relatable, how to connect with anyone, anywhere, even if it scares you. We'll put it in the show notes and people can find a way to get it through whatever platform they want. Quite an achievement writing the book, and you lean heavily on the research. I want to throw this at you, and you know, being relatable, being connected, it's ubiquitous, right? Everybody's like, you have to be authentic, be yourself. Everybody else is taken, ha ha ha. Even names of events that you speak at, connected, connectivity, be relatable, on and on. And in the world of overdosing on all these gurus and tips and tricks and shortcuts and everything, what is it about Rachel D'Alto that distinguishes you among all the others in this topic, in this subject matter area?
It's interesting. There are so many amazing speakers about connection, human connection, relationships. I think I might have cornered the relatability market, but half the time people are like, I don't even know that a relatability expert exists. They do now.
Right.
But I think, everybody has
Relatability, I already have like 25 cousins. What do you mean?
exactly. So, I think everybody has a different approach. And that's the beautiful thing about being a speaker and about being amongst some phenomenal colleagues. I know Smiley you had on your podcast before, and he's fantastic and also speaks about belonging and human connection all around the same kind of foundational principles.
By the way, for
And
the record, and this is back to your honor, you compete with Smiley's smile at a very high level. So just,
oh,
you know, he's not on his own there. So I had to.
oh,
It was there for the
I could
taking.
be
I had
like
to take the swing.
Smiley, Smiley too. But, yeah, they're such amazing people, and I think it just depends on the message. It depends on really what people are looking to really identify and take home, and, I think I am I love to mix things together. To me, I wanna be entertaining,
Mhm.
and storytelling is such a huge part of what I do because I think it's the only way that we actually absorb information. So I think I do bring a unique mixture of that storytelling, but with the data and the research and all of the principles behind it. And at the end of the day, I really want to be pragmatic. I want people to walk away with something that they can start doing right now and not necessarily, unless it's like a workshop and then it's really giving them a worksheet and on principles that they can, start implementing. But just from even a high level of how do I do this differently? How do I be different? How do I connect better? And actually, you mentioned the first book. My next book's coming out in like a month. So
Let's see it.
we've
Bring
got
it out. Bring
another
it out.
one.
Let's
Yeah, it's The Relatable Leader. So it's create a culture of connection. So
love
super
that.
excited about that.
Congratulations. It's quite an
We did a
accomplishment. We're
dorky
gonna have
amount.
to we'll highlight that when it gets debuted. That's really awesome.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Lots
Yeah.
of footnotes in that guy too. So
Yeah.
I
So
just
tell us
yeah,
about
I think
that.
it's the mix.
So relatable leader, it is a mix, and it's not being lost on me. I can relate to you and your story. Psychology, law. I'm not a psychologist. I wasn't in law school, but you know, you're maybe ahead of the curve, if you will. And we can talk about relatable leader, the current workforce, and people are blends. You're not one thing anymore for 40 years. I mean, that's already been in the zeitgeist for a while now, but really you are a drawing from so many different realms and so many different domains and all these different pistons firing, research and the psychology and TV and media and listening to the to the Instagram sphere and all the what people are saying, and then finding your voice, and it's really really cool. And I think that is one aspect of the uniqueness, plus being an author and an extraordinary speaker and having that varied background. Connect your new work, your new book, with employee engagement and how leaders can address that. I'm not saying it's broken, but maybe there's a way to make it work better than it's working.
Yeah, and that's really what that came down to when I had no desire to write another book. I had no desire to research another book. And then I was just hearing there was a disconnect between what leaders were putting out there and what teams were actually wanting from their leadership. And that's really what drew the entire book and created the outline for it. Because I think in where we are right now, we oftentimes there's so much thought leadership around leadership, and sometimes it's like a mile down the road from where we need to start. And so what I realized that I actually did my own proprietary study for this one,
Wait,
and
wait a
then
minute. Wait a minute. It thought leadership about leadership. It sounds so academic and so conceptual.
yeah, yeah. Well, so it's not.
No, no, no. You're saying you noticed that what was out there was,
Yes.
that.
It was it was so I mean, and I love so many of these thought leaders, and there are leaders who are capable of really implementing what they're talking about, whether we're talking about vulnerability or shame or authenticity on that higher level. And there are leaders who are capable of doing all of those things. But what I realized is if we really want to create that culture of connection, if we want to be a relatable leader, we've got to start back at the basics. And that's what all of the research showed. So I did my own study, and all of the things that people are looking for, those things are on the list. All of that kind of higher level emotional intelligence from leadership is all on the list, but it's so much further down because we're not there yet. And that's really where a relatable leader goes back to. And I love it for especially emerging leaders because they weren't taught. All of a sudden
Right.
you're leading a team and you're
Right.
like, I have
Right.
no idea what I'm doing
Yeah.
here. And so they're thinking, I need to be vulnerable and authentic. Well, no, we need to start with trust and respect and communication. So that's really the genesis of the book, is getting people back to basics. And it's that human connection on a very basic level of, you need these foundational principles or we're not going anywhere.
What
And
what are a
everybody is
few
going somewhere.
what are a
They're
few of those
leaving.
key basics, key foundational
Yeah, well,
ideas?
the one that surprised the heck out of me was the number one, all generations. So we broke it down with generations, and it was respect. People are looking for respect. And, I say it all the time. I'm like, I thought that was a given. I, I thought that was kind of a basic principle, but kind of what you said before, if people are saying you're so relatable, it's likely could possibly be because they don't feel relatable themselves. Well, it's the same thing when you are saying, this is what I want out of a leader. 90% of the time, it's because they're not getting it. They're
Yeah.
asking for what they need
Mm,
because it's not there.
yeah.
And so for me, I looked at that and I was like, "Oh, I need to write this and remind people of we're not there yet. We're not."
I mean, I'm the classic armchair psychologist, but it's like it's a projection, right? And it's like if you really listen, and there you go again, Rachel, you were listening. What you were hearing was that there was this that needed, and there you go and do your research, and you get smart about it, and you write a book. And do you have a keynote that accompanies this? Do you have a new
I
keynote,
do.
or are you folding in the new concepts to it, to existing
No,
ones?
it's a completely different keynote. So I have kind of Relatable, which is more about the team building and interconnection there. And then I have Relatable Leader, which is just for leadership, and it's all based on the research. And so, yeah, I debuted that, I want to say like 6 months ago.
That's
So
cool. Yeah.
yeah, it is cool. It's exciting
Yeah.
and a lot of
And
fun too.
It,
It's
it's
meaty.
interesting because while we can break it down by generation, there are those emerging leaders or existing leaders that they're on the cusp, right? They straddle a few generations, right? And so there's the blend and there's a little bit of that fusion, if you will. Do you find that happens?
Oh, what 100%. And what the interesting thing too is with the data is that there was so much similarity. There was more similarity than there were differences when you really did break it down by generation. The
Hmm.
nuances were, obviously this isn't going to be surprising that the younger generations, they don't want to talk to you in person or on video. They want to do it via text or Slack. But for the most part, and I think that's the coolest thing of it, is that from a foundational principle, we're all looking for the same thing. We're all looking to be respected and seen and heard and communicated with, and we look to trust people. And and I think there's so much of that missing in today's leadership, and some of it is not their fault because they were never shown how to show that and how to create that because they've
Yeah.
just been put in these positions and then moved along, and all of a sudden you're 50 something years old and you're like, I've been a leader for like 10 years and I still don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
'Cause I
Right.
know I looked back on that and I'm like, "Poof,
Right.
could've done that better."
And some have that ability and the skill to, find their way, find their footing. But boy, would it have been a different story if there was some guidance, some direction, some foundation, some basic principles that, were offered and people could, glom onto.
Yeah,
Uh,
would have been nice.
yeah, it would have been nice. Well, I just want to underscore how great this conversation is and how rich it is. And, for our subscribers and our listeners and our viewers, I know that this is why you come back all the time for each episode to get connected, to get related to our guests and their messages and how it can make a difference in your life, both, in the personal and the business part of it. So thank you, everybody. Rachel, we're going to finish it up here. I could go on and on, as I often say with you. I love this conversation. It's an art, the art of being connected, the art of being relatable. And it's an art that's constantly evolving and expanding. And, I think it's really, really cool that you took the time, and very generous of you to be with us today and share your insights and your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome.
You're very, very welcome. And again, to our viewers, subscribers, thanks for coming back. We'll see you next time.